First of all, thanks so much. It's great to see everyone. This is our third webinar, and I'm super excited about the topic today. Not just because we get to talk about 3D with Christian, which is always amazing, but we also have a very special guest joining us soon. One of our users, inCitu users, Brian Lee Jr. from Colocate Design in New Orleans, is going to share a story about a project that they did. And I'm super excited to hear from Brian a little bit later. Oh, here's Brian right now. So we're going to hear a little bit from Brian later. But before we do, just to go over a little agenda for today. So we're going to first introduce inCitu and what we do. Then we're going to introduce our platform, inCituAR. If you were in the days of inCitu Pro, you might notice that we've recently started to rebrand. So inCituAR is the new name. And then we're going to talk about 3D to AR workflows and sort of like what type of 3D we're creating, like what is the actual use case here. And we're going to go over the best practices with Christian. Actually, before that, though, we're going to have Brian introduce some of the work that they're doing down in New Orleans. And then at the very end, please hang on to the very end because it's the most fun part for me is some good examples for easy to use 3D tools. So if we're talking about 3D with Christian and you find that it is a little bit hard to understand, that's totally fine. We're going to try to keep it big picture, but even if you have no 3D background, there are some ways to create really easy, quick projects in inCituAR, and I'm going to show you 3 examples at the end of the webinar. So definitely stay on till the end. Let's dive in. So inCitu, So inCitu, we bring future cities to life via augmented reality to foster collaboration around the process of urban change. We're a little over 3 years old right now, founded, of course, by Donna, and we turn design and planning data into location-based mobile AR experiences to radically lower the friction for communicating and understanding projects in situ. We empower residents, industry professionals, and city leaders to unlock better conversations about the future of their communities. So our philosophy is to basically meet people where they are, take planning back into its urban context and put it back on the street to have these conversations on the street and lower the friction. We use mobile augmented reality. So we're not using headsets, Apple Vision Pro. We use mobile AR, and we do this for 3 reasons. 1, it's accessible. Only a smartphone is required. Almost everyone has a smartphone now, or somebody on the street has one. You can look over their shoulder. The second reason is because it's intuitive. So when you can experience information with your own senses, where you are through your point of view, that is empowering. And empowering means that we can show future developments in your point of view so that you have it in your hands. And we know from research that that's very powerful. The difference between having it in your hands and holding it versus hearing it from a presenter up on a slide deck like this is a big difference. So our platform is called inCituAR. It's a web-based no-code platform to turn 3D to AR. You can try it out at inCitu.us/pro. You get 1 project free in the basic tier. The workflow is super simple. Just upload a 3D model, place it in the world with no-code web-based AR platform. And then it is living at that location connected to a QR code. You can scan a QR code with an iOS or Android phone without having to download an app from the App Store and see that project in its real location or view it remotely. If you're in your office, you can see it in a desktop view or on the web with a 3D web map. So we're about 6 months into this journey of launching inCituAR, and we have a growing user community now. We have a Slack user group, and we've got loads of folks from architects, planners, to community advocates that are using our tool to create projects for showing affordable housing designs, showing street furniture, showing environmental resilience scenarios. There's all kinds of things people are doing with it. We hope you'll join the community and continue the journey with us today. And so today we're here to talk about 3D. And so one of the questions I wanted to put to everyone here is, if you work with 3D in your job, even if you're not directly modeling the 3D, what are some of your pain points when it comes to using 3D for visualization. Whether you're creating an image or creating a video or an interactive experience, what's difficult about that right now? But I would love to hear if you have any examples. In our experience with inCituAR, we encounter, it's a big friction point, right? Like mostly when we introduce the tool to everybody, they say, this is great, I want to do a project, but I don't have a 3D model, or my 3D model is not ready to upload yet. So we know this is a big friction point, and we have 3 strategies that we're sort of using to make this friction point more seamless to enable AR workflows. The first strategy is automation. So we automatically convert lots of different 3D formats to our platform when you upload them. We're working on features such as material editor to make adjusting those models after uploading a lot easier. And then also long-term is sort of the optimization. How could we automate optimizing large models to make them more performant for mobile? So the next strategy we use is integration. So connecting to existing 3D planning tools, whether through API or through integrations or add-ons. And so some of the ones that we've launched very recently, which we're really excited about, is ArcGIS Online integration. You can now sign in with your ArcGIS Online account and publish projects back and forth from 3D feature layers to inCitu. We are about to launch or have just launched the Autodesk Forma extension. So Forma is a tool in Autodesk to do site-specific studies in the early stage of urban projects. And you can now publish those projects through to AR with the extension that we're developing. Look for an announcement about that. I think if we haven't made it already, coming very soon. And then some other extensions and integrations we're thinking about are SketchUp and Revit. And you might have some other suggestions. So we do a survey for each of these webinars. If you have any suggestions for integrations, feel free to write them in the chat or take that survey and let us know what integrations you would like to see. So finally, the third strategy, which we're going to be focusing on today, is education. So we can create less friction by educating people in how to create 3D for AR. So today we're doing a webinar, but we also have lots of documentation on our website. We're talking about a sample library. It's a new feature that we added a bit later. And then we are developing a handbook of 3D tools for AR, best practices, sort of bringing together a bunch of the stuff we've learned over 3 years. And we're going to have some information on that, how to get that handbook at the end of the webinar. So the big picture here is we want to create 3D for AR, but what is that? I think a lot of you, if you're in an urban profession, might have used 3D for planning a project, for construction, for marketing. But what is 3D for AR, and what are we doing here? Well, we think about it as creating better conversations, which means that we're trying to replace a status quo way of communicating urban projects, which is very full of friction and it's full of misunderstanding. And one of the reasons is that we often present data as if that's going to help people understand things. But we know from experience and research that people don't understand, people don't remember just raw data when it's in their face. Like, people remember stories, people remember experiences. We know that now, and a lot of our clients are telling us that they know this too. Whether it's Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, everyone's kind of coming around to the idea that planners need to be storytellers. And so when we use media, 3D media, digital media, 3D graphics, we're using them increasingly as storytelling tools. So we need to think about how to create 3D for storytelling. And so that'll be the topic that we're going to keep talking about today. We have Christian on later to talk about some of our specific best practices, but I thought we'd open with a story from our user community from Brian Lee Jr. With Collocate Design in New Orleans. So Brian's here. I'll just introduce him real quick. It's up on the slide, but Brian's an architect and a leading design justice advocate. He's the founder and director of Collocate Design, a nonprofit design practice, and he's committed to using design as a tool for social change. He's the founding organizer of the Design as Protest Collective and Dark Matter University, which work to uplift the voices and perspective of marginalized communities in the built environment. And loads of awards here that you can read about. But I'll let Brian introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about the project. Feel free to prompt me to advance the slides.
Hello. Can y'all hear me?
Can hear.
All right, I'm outside, so if it gets a little
Nice.
windy, please just let me know. Again, how you doing? My name is Brian Seeley Jr. I am the principal of Co-Locate Design. We are a small architecture practice, as you just heard. The work that we do is focused on civic, communal, cultural spaces. Our job is to make sure that we work in community with community, the communities that we serve to again, uplift the stories of place. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about a project called the Storia Project. The Storia Project is a collection of small civic pavilions that are essentially designed to hold the immediate stories of place, to hold the narratives that community members who have been extant to that community for as long as one can remember. So on these slides, you'll see three different projects. I'm going to show you two of them. Story Project Defrag House was really about displacement. All three of these projects were about displacement, but Defrag is about a neighborhood, like the physical neighborhood displacement out of buildings, homes, and other gathering spaces get detached and detangled from place. Delta was about the displacement of ecological displacement. And Storia Jimbe is fundamentally a cultural displacement. But I wanted to start with Jimbe, so we can go to the next slide. One big thing about these projects is that we spent a significant amount of time doing community engagement over the course of the last 2 years. These were, when we talk about engagement, there's three levels to it. We do outreach, or there is outreach, there is engagement, and there's organizing. We tend towards organizing. And the way that we think about organizing is a way for people to actually fully invest themselves into the project, both from a design standpoint and from a kind of cultural and social standpoint. And the best way to do that is for people to kind of engage in the act of creating, making, and the best way to demonstrate that is to show people what they've made being implemented in the context of the project they're working on. So this project is called Storia Jimbe. We are in the Chimay in New Orleans. This project is adjacent from a historic location called the Candlelight Lounge. If you've ever been to New Orleans, it's an old school lounge that does a lot of blues and jazz, and it's been there for 40, 50, 60 years. This lot was an abandoned an abandoned lot that got turned into a little parklet by one of the neighbors. Those neighbors had taken care of this lot in perpetuity for the last decade, and the request more recently was, can we provide some shade, and can we actually provide some sort of event space? And so we started to think about what Jimbe looked like, and Jimbe was a way for us to kind of think about storytelling, specifically people local to this area. So we asked people, a bunch of questions about what they thought would be a way to articulate that the design of the space, and then we showed it to them. And so after 2 years, we've had these conversations, and folks felt good, but weren't sure where they wanted to go. And so we got a little bit of pushback as we got towards the end of this process. And the story I kind of wanted to kind of close on relative to this particular project is about a month ago, we had a project, we had a community meeting. About 20 people came out to express their concerns and making sure that this wasn't just an imposed project from some outsider. And I've been here for 15 years, worked with community members across the board for this project, but they wanted to see it. And so we talked about it for about 30 minutes. And then finally, I just said, let's go outside. Let's go outside. Let's look at it. We pulled out the iPad. We were able to immediately dissuade folks from the kind of antagonism that was previously established relative to this project, and people jumped on board really, really quickly. And so we went from having a tentative approval to have this on this specific site to having a confirmed approval and an excited constituency within about 10 minutes in terms of people walking around with the app. So it was really, really beautiful for them to see, to get excited about it, and to actually see themselves in the context of place. So you can see a little bit of scale for one of the people in the space.
Yeah, Brian, I'm going to just go back one slide just to put that QR up again. If anyone wants to see the remote view of the Djembe project, this is the QR code to scan to open the remote view with inCitu. You will see in your camera once you accept the camera permissions. If you point it at any flat surface like the floor or the table and tap your finger on the screen, it'll load that model in and let us know if you need any help. All right.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of just note that it does that in such with such grace and ease that we were able to have our elders in the community be able to use their phones as well, just to be able to jump into this site. So really, really beautiful. All aspects of our community wandering around in this blank site, but with this beautiful AR component visible to them in the background. This project will go up in the next few weeks, and that is in part, if not in full, from the permit side of things, because we were able to demonstrate what it looked like in place. So I think I want to kind of maybe stop on that particular project. I can show you one more project that has a similar story. We were able to so the defrag house was again another pavilion that we've been using and working on with a local arts organization, and this is really about telling the story of displaced housing across Treme and across New Orleans as spaces get gentrified. It takes it's very easy. It takes maybe 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 seconds for it to load, and then you can scale it appropriately on site, and or you have the existing scaled building already in site. So this is one of those where we were actually able to work with the client a bit more for them to demonstrate, or to specifically demonstrate what this would look like on their site. It's really one of those pieces, and this particular project, PFRAG, was a project where we weren't able to really fully convince the client of what they were getting until we were actually able to go out to the site, show them precisely in place where they were going to be and how they were going to be able to articulate the building itself, how they're going to be able to open it, how they're going to be able to kind of manipulate the project. So
very cool.
So again, yeah, both doing the same things. I do appreciate it. So those are the 2 projects.
Awesome. We just had a question in chat about, is anyone else trying to see the AR and need any help? I was able to pull it up on my phone just now, so from the QR code, but if anyone else has help, there's some staff in the chat with advice, but yeah, it's really cool to see it. I mean, it's obviously not in context, but to see it like while you're talking about it just is pretty neat. So thanks so much for that story, Brian. Does anyone, I guess we do need to move on, but if anyone has any questions for Brian, feel free to, ask or type in chat. And if you have any later, I know Brian might have to go, but we can always relay questions, and hope everybody will connect with each other as well. Okay, so thanks so much, Brian. Oh, yeah, you're still muted. That looks like a really cool place where you're at too. So thanks for joining us. Yeah, so I hope that story, there's 2 stories, give you sort of a sense of like diving into 3D. So we sort of know the use case of the 3D model. So it's not just any 3D model. We're using 3D models to hold conversations with the community about projects. And so what types of things might be important when it comes to creating 3D models for this purpose? So these are some things that we came up with. You might have more to add, and feel free to type in the chat if you have any ideas. But first and foremost, we think that 3D models for storytelling, and we're learning this in the chat right now too, they need to be optimized. They need to be mobile friendly. So they should load quickly, hopefully, ideally. And they should be usable in real-time tools that are using the processor on your device, potentially, and tools that are interactive, like games, are increasingly being used for this. So we need 3D models that are almost built more like game models, I think. The next thing is that they do need to be interoperable with the other types of models we use in the industry. So how might we create standards for, creating connections to the BIM models? Like often we're getting models that were created in BIM standards in tools like Revit or Rhino. How can we have those speak out to these types of models that are used for storytelling, but not be as heavy as those models? And are there standards that we need to create together? Third thing, most important, I think, is that when you're building for augmented reality, for real scale on-site augmented reality, the way that we are doing with inCituAR, the use case of the model is going to be from the street, from the human level, human scale, just like a real building. And so for modeling something for real scale, you're going to be thinking about how is it going to look from at real size from the street corner. And so that is going to influence things like, where do you add the detail? You have a certain budget for detail on a model. Where does that matter to add it? And then the next thing is that since it's for storytelling, art style matters a lot. It's not just a blueprint. So, and I don't think there's a correct answer to this, but like, think about how the art style is speaking both to your community, both to the type of conversations you want to be holding, and sort of to the environment of the storytelling you want to have. Like, are you trying to do a visioning? What stage of the process are you at? Are you at the beginning and you want to do a visioning about possible futures and all kinds of things? Are you near the end of the process and you want to inform people very carefully about the facts that have been decided? All of that might influence your art style. We sort of landed on a stylized realistic style, which I think works great, but I don't think this is a solved thing or solvable thing. The last one is to be adaptable to edits and iteration. I think inCitu is not just a marketing tool. It's not just a platform for showing something that's already been decided. A lot of times we're making decisions while we're walking around in AR. And so to create models that are able to be edited and iterated on quickly is pretty important, especially for these type of co-creation, design charrettes, and all the stuff that we would like to do more of, I think, in the future. So with that said, what are some topics that we could talk to? We're going to bring on Christian, our lead 3D engineer, to start to dig into some of the ways we might create 3D models for storytelling. We're going to use 3 examples of 3D models that inCitu team has created for projects and demos. And some of the topics we're going to be talking about are the materials and how to create a model from scratch, how to adapt a model that you have existing architectural model, and then some special topics like on how to make models blend in better with local site conditions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Christian. Come on up.
Hi, I'm here.
Hey, thanks for helping out. I know I couldn't do this alone. So do you want to, or was I going to talk through the general requirements here? I guess so.
You can talk through and we can continue.
Okay. So what does it take to get a 3D model into inCitu? So the basic requirements, we accept a lot of different file types, but Christian might mention later, we automatically convert most of these file types that you upload into GLB and USDZ, which are the types that we're using on the back end. So understanding how those GLB and USDZ file type in particular work and how they render materials is going to be pretty useful knowledge to have. The second thing, the file size, this is probably the most important requirement. If I say when our file size limit is 25 megabytes, and if you're a 3D professional, you might gasp a little bit when you hear that. It's pretty low if you're used to working for like pre-rendered, post-processed 3D. And so it might seem small, but there's a reason why it's this low. The technical reason is that inCituAR uses app clips or instant apps to host the AR. So what this allows is we can have native AR features on your phone without requiring an app download. And why did we choose this? Because in the early days, we put decals on the street and nobody would bother to download an app from the App Store. We knew this and we wanted to reduce the friction to be a tool for accessible community engagement. So that's why we worked within App Clips or Instant App as a great feature to let people get in and have the experience without much friction. And aside from that, a lot of the communities that you might be wanting to communicate with might have limited data plans on their phones. They might have limited bandwidth. So the smaller we can learn to do 3D models, the better. And we have lots of tricks for working within this limit. So some of those tricks might be mesh decimation or reducing the number of polygons that you use. But Christian will talk more about that in a bit. So we're going to move on to the first model that we're going to talk about. So Christian, what is this model that we're looking at here? It's like a big tower.
Yeah, so this is the waterline model in Austin, Texas, and it is expected to become the tallest building in Austin and Texas. So we had an opportunity to prepare this in a short time frame. So to achieve this, we use some common modeling principles, which includes the PBR shading, the physically based rendering, and the texture baking. So I think we can move to the next slides and I can talk within details.
Cool. This was a demo,
Yes.
by the way, this was a demo for South by Southwest. So we made it, and I think in just a few days. Christian is amazing. It's not affiliated with the project, by the way, and we took a couple liberties, but overall, really successful demo. So first step, how did you optimize this model?
Yes, so when we're modeling from scratch, it is important to keep all the details low and the polygon count low, and focus only on the parts of the model which will be visible from the user's viewpoint. In this case, this is the front side of the building, and you're looking only on the first base floor. So we kept the polygon count low on the upper levels, and we added details to the base. So we can move to the next slide.
So this is about lighting, right? So there's some very jargon words here, and I know I know a little bit from my Blender learning experience, but can you tell us about, like, maybe we don't have to learn everything, but just like why is lighting important here, and what are you talking about really when you're talking about UVs and ambient occlusion and unwrapping things?
Yes, so to properly use the textures and like the whole PBR rendering technique or method, the basic is to have a model UV unwrapped, which means that the UV data needs to be like flattened. And next, when we move to ambient occlusion baking, this means that we can see the self shadows on this model. In the image is already visible that we have these small shadow clusters in the edge.
So yeah, I could definitely see the difference here. It looks like there's the self-cast shadows here. And then someone in the chat, Krista, is asking, does the lighting include shadows based upon the time of day and the time of year? And well, short answer, we've done some projects like that, right? Where you could see the live lighting conditions. But this really brings up the topic that we're talking about right now, which is sort of what is the difference between dynamic lighting and static lighting? And particularly, this is what we're talking about here with the baking, so-called baking, is static lighting. So we're sort of taking shadows and baking them or drawing them into the texture of the 3D model so that they're included within it, which is very, very well optimized. So it should keep the file size low and perform well. What that does sacrifice is the ability to change in real time. And so those are some of the choices that you might have to make when you're deciding how to light your model. But yeah, this is one option, and even just the self-cast shadows here, the ambient occlusion, you can already see sort of the improvement in how that looks. So is that accurate, Christian? Sort of like we're basically baking layers onto the texture of the model to add more and more detail without having to use real-time calculation to do it, right?
Yes, that is accurate. And we found that the static lighting and the shadow also looks really good on these AR models, because the shadow and the light details are more defined if we do that in some rendering engines or 3D softwares like 3D Studio Max or Blender. And to answer the setting the shadows based on the time and date, it is possible both in Blender and 3D Studio Max with the rendering engine. So you can just set whatever time you plan to show this AR, and the light, the sun, will set to that position. We can move to the next slide. Yes, so for example, we can already see here the baked light and shadow.
So we had the
texture.
self-cast light, the ambient occlusion, and then
Yes.
this is adding in the lighting from like the sun, basically. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. We can move to the next slide. So this is more about the details. So we added these trees, bows, and some fake people here on the first floor. So the trees are really low poly meshes, and we used transparent image textures, like overlap textures, so it looks like a real tree. And it also looks really good in AR. And we can save up on some polygon and detail levels. So for the PBR material is, this workflow is supported by all the rendering engines. So it is working also on WebGL, on mobile AR engines, and it simulates how the light interacts with materials in a realistic way. So the end result is really realistic.
So some of the physically based properties would be what, like reflection, shininess, metallicness. Is that right?
Yes. So yeah, for this material setup, we use the metallic approach. This includes some surfaces and parts of the model which has these metallic attributes, and also the roughness and some overlaid texture attributes.
So when talking about 3D model materials, one of the examples I've heard a lot is like one of those Santa Claus chocolates with the foil wrapper, dressed up like Santa Claus. And so when you unwrap one of those chocolates, you have this like really distorted Santa Claus face, right? But if it's wrapped around the chocolate, it makes the chocolate look like Santa Claus. So when thinking about PBR materials, is it correct to assume that PBR materials are like putting sort of several wrappers like layered on top of each other over this chocolate, and one of them has the reflective parts, one of them has the metallic part? Is that sort of accurate?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's like more than one
yeah.
texture applied to the model for different physical properties. And so baking those or creating those textures is how you do this workflow. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Okay, so in this phase, we have all our textures baked and the PBR material is set up. So for the glass, we experimented a lot with the glass material, and the best way to do is to separate this mesh or apply a new material to the glass and work only on the glass. So to achieve these environmental reflections, we use the metallic and roughness attributes in the material. So the best is to keep both of those values really low, around 0 point something. And for the transparency, we use a semi-transparent PNG texture in the material alpha channel. So with this, we can control how transparent the glass will be. And usually the transparency level is around 70%. So these textures can be prepared in Photoshop or any image
So don't worry if you're not
generated.
taking notes. If you're a 3D pro enough to follow what Christian's saying and you're not taking notes, don't worry. We have this stuff in our documentation, or we will soon, to figure out the right settings. A lot of times, I think when trying to do glass and then you put it in AR, and a lot of times it will just not look the way that it looked in your program. So we do have some recommended settings for that we can provide you with. Feel free to reach out. Yeah, and then let's see. Another thing that you were saying that might have been hard to understand, I think, was that you're sort of separated the part of the 3D model that is all the glass from the rest of the model, so that you could just apply one material to it. So creating the model sort of in different parts that have different materials applied is the what you're just talking about there. Yeah.
Yes, usually that is my preferred workflow, but if you are all familiar with keeping all the mesh as one and have like multiple materials applied to that one mesh, that will also work.
Sort of like if Santa Claus had a reindeer, but the reindeer had its
Yes,
own wrapper,
exactly.
instead of Santa Claus and the reindeer has one candy that has one wrapper. It's basically the difference there.
Yes.
So this is what it looked like when we were done. Again, this was just a quick demo. It was maybe not up to our full project standard, but we wanted to show something very specific because the tower was under construction. So we wanted people to be able to see how tall it was going to be when it was done. And I think it came out really well for what we were trying to do. And we put a decal out on the street in Austin, and it was really amazing to look at. And you can see how the glass got semi-transparent. Now, this is an older version of that model, which we've since updated. And so some of the things Christian was talking about, like the detail, you can see how compared to this experience, having that detail on the ground level really would enhance someone who's viewing it on the actual site. And so one of the topics we talk about is like, you notice in this later version of the model, a lot of the budget of detail is spent at that ground level because that's where your user's going to be looking at it, right? So, shall we move on to the next model?
Yes.
So, what is this model? This is a real project for a client in New York, right?
Yes. So for these models, we already had the 3D models, and those was really high polygon and large models. Some was larger than 500 megabytes. So the challenge here was to like remove all the unnecessary or invisible details, which includes like all the interior components like staircases, pipes, inner walls, furniture, and from exterior like remove all the surrounding terrain, like some high polygon detail like people, trees, and all the detail that is not needed or not visible.
What format did they give you the building model in originally?
Yeah, this was in Rhino.
It was
Like
a Rhino
yes,
project.
it's a Rhino project. Yes, so all of these was exported and then optimized in Blender, and some of them was optimized in 3D Studio Max. For optimization, we are using few tools or techniques. The most common is the mesh decimation.
Mesh decimation. So let's break that down.
Yes.
So basically decimate. So if it has 10,000 polygons in the model, we're trying to bring that down to like 1,000, right?
Yes.
Or at least whatever point of the slider we're driving it to.
Yes. So the polygon counts are usually like tens of millions, and we try to bring that down to like 100K. And what the mesh decimation is doing is like getting a high detail mesh data and try to like break down by keeping the details and not changing the mesh shape. So after that is done, we always like go through and see how we can remove some details manually, like deleting some interior mesh and what I mentioned. So
what are the likely culprits of where unnecessary detail is stored on these big architectural models? Like, have you ever had to remove a doorknob that has 1,000,000 polygons or something like that?
yes, we had one model with toilets and all the bolts
Individual
and
bolts on the toilet. There you
yes, and
go.
also the like sensors and like these really tiny details. So
Wow.
yes, it is always a challenge and it requires some time. Yeah.
Cool. So once
Yes.
the mesh is at the right number of polygons, what do you have to do next to sort of make it pop as its own model?
Yes. So after that, we are doing the UV unwrapping and all the details that we talked on, like modeling from scratch. And also in this case, we had all the textures for the materials, but because of these high like decimation and
Mm.
manual work, we had to reapply those textures and materials to
So basically
replicate the render.
so in the architectural project, you might have like hundreds of windows that are each have their own object and they each have their own glass material, and you have to like, combine them all into one
Yes,
mesh that has all the windows in one object that just has one
yes,
glass material because that's going to save space. Is that right?
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we baked again the shadows, the ambient occlusion, and added some
Mhm.
details. So these trees and sunflowers and poles always looks good in AR. So yeah, those are the steps.
Awesome. And yeah, this project, like Donna said, is really significant for us. Back when inCitu started doing proofs of concept in New York, and we were putting sort of guerrilla style signage out on the street corners, trying to show that there's a better way than the current public notice signs that we put out for new buildings. And so this project was the very first official AR enabled public notification signage for a development in New York City, at least. And the developer Radson developers, bought into our idea and, worked with us to develop the signage. And it's up right now in the Bronx at 241st Street, Wakefield. So, check it out. I think this is a huge milestone and really showing sort of the way forward. So, and because we were able to bring this model into range of being able to see on your mobile phone. That's what lets the whole thing work. So anyway, that's great. So there's another topic that we were going to use this model to talk about, which is sort of about adapting existing models. Is there's two things that can lead to an unhappy experience when you upload to inCitu. One is where the origin point of your 3D model is, and the other is like the scale of that model, the size of it. So which one should we talk about first, Christian? Maybe the scale.
Yes, we can talk about the scale. So in inCitu and like the other like WebGL and mobile rendering or other tools are defaults to meters. So that's why before we export from any software the 3D model, we need to make sure that the scene is set the scene units are set to meters. So this is pretty simple and it is available in all
And
3D
later
softwares.
on, yeah, we'll talk about like how to use some models that you download from other sources, and to check the scale on those it's pretty important, so that they come out the right size. And yeah, so meters, and then so the other issue is where the 0, 0 point is on your model. The origin point is not only where the model will rotate around when you're rotating it in inCitu, but it's also the point that it gets anchored, so to speak, in AR. And so the closer the viewer is to that 0, 0 point, the more accurate your AR positioning is going to be. And one of the things with the architectural projects is you might go into SketchUp or Revit and find that the building has been placed pretty far away from that 0, 0 point. So when you go to upload that to inCitu, it's going to be off in the ocean when you really meant to place it, at the street corner. So is that just a matter, Christian, of sort of resetting the model to have a 0, 0 point? And also, where should that 0, 0 point be, for example, on a building like this?
Yes, for these experiences, we roughly already know what will be the point on the street where we will put the QR codes. And knowing that, we find this point on the model, let's call it pivot point, and we position the model to the 0, 0. For example, in this case, the pivot point is on the right corner. So the model's 0, 0 is on that corner. And that is the closest point to the viewer on the street. And it helps the geospatial AR engine to work with the best precision, because that is the closest point to the user's device, creating
Awesome.
the anchors here.
Awesome. Great description. We had some comments like Revit's coordination system is very misleading. I tried SketchUps as well, and I found it confusing. Blender, I'm a little more used to with the 3D cursor, but yeah, someone else said the red barricade. Yeah, the red barricade is real. The model is not real, and there's a construction fence that it's occluding, and then our 3D models will occlude not cars. Maybe that's a feature, not a bug, but they will occlude people. So if you're walking in front of the 3D model, it should cut out a person, at least if they're sort of close to you. I think in that GIF, there's someone really far away. It doesn't catch them. But if it's in the image on the bottom and you're trying to take a sort of photo op, you can do it this way using inCitu. And that's a real use case that, for example, the mayor of Columbus used to make an Instagram post in front of a 3D model of the bus station. So that was exciting. So we're going to move on. We've got about 10 minutes to cover some, and we'll get to the fun part. I promise we'll get to the fun part, but there is one more advanced sort of feature of the 3D models that we should talk about. And this is, how do you work with projects where you have a building that is, you know, adding on maybe adaptive reuse, or it's wrapping around existing buildings, or it's in the middle of a row of townhouses. If you're going to publish that project and you walk to either side, you're going to be able to see parts of that 3D model that you wouldn't be able to see if that was a real building. And so how we deal with this is through occlusion, which is selectively hiding the 3D model based on real world things that should be blocking it. And so, Christian, you want to explain on this model, this is for a Brooklyn building near McCarran Park, how we managed to preserve, there's a diner sort of restaurant at the corner where that gray box is, and we want to be able to see that real building when we're out on the street. So how did you do that?
Yes, so actually for this model, I remember we were there and measured the size of the existing building, which is this gray box, and added that to the model. And the only thing we need to do is rename this mesh to occluder. So the mesh name should be occluder, and also apply a material, like a random material with name occluder. So this will render a virtual object behind the real world object. So it is really important to have, an immersive AR experience.
So what is the part of the technology that's reading those names, occluder, the material and the mesh name occluder?
Yeah, so that is done in the inCitu application. Yeah.
Okay, so that's our application that will read that and recognize that you've named your material occluder. So that's how you do it. So yeah, that's the Bernie's restaurant on the corner, and you can see the 3D model behind it there. This project should still be up at that location, I think. So great, that's great. We are almost at time, 2:53. Thank you so much for being patient through this technical portion. I hope you've learned something if you're a 3D person, and if not, at least have some keywords that you can use to start to research and understand, because you might have people on your team that work with 3D, but they might not have worked with real-time 3D or optimized models in this way before. So the best part of the webinar right now, in my opinion, I mean, Brian's story was amazing. We were playing with some new tools this week to do some proof of concepts, and I'm so excited to share these with you all. So these are some 3D tools you can use to create AR projects like in the next 10 minutes. If you want to sign up for inCitu Pro account right now, follow along. This is how you do it. So the first thing we experimented with, before we get to that, we have a new feature in inCitu to announce. This is much requested feature from our user community. To sample model library is built right into your interface. So when you publish a project, you'll be able to select an existing model from our library to do a demo project, maybe show the tool to some of your colleagues. We have 3 models to choose from right now. and you can select them right at stage 1 of the publishing process. So feel free to give that a try. And if you have ideas for what models we should include in our model library going forward, I'd love to hear those. Fill out that survey link that Zeev put in the chat and let us know. So first, proof of concept. We talked about downloading assets from model libraries. Happy Halloween. It's Halloween tomorrow, I believe. So we went to Sketchfab, which is soon to be called Fab. Apparently it's been bought out by Epic, but you can still get through free 3D models from Sketchfab if you go there and look for, you can sort by the license type. So usually sort by Creative Commons or Creative Commons 0 and download a model like this haunted house. And you can just upload that as you download it as a GLB file is usually the best one. Upload it as is to inCitu. The one thing to keep in mind is it might be the size of a toy. And so if you want it to be building size, you'll either need to manually and very slowly scale it up in our edit mode, or bring it into a tool like Blender or Sketchfab and just blow that size up and re-export it. And we'll have guides for that soon. The next one, this is so any sort of physical model, if you ever made a paper architecture model or a clay, or you have a toy building, you can get that into city scale AR very easily using 3D scanning apps on your phone, such as Polycam. You can create a physical model, scan it into 3D, and download it directly from Polycam as a GLB file. Upload it to inCitu, adjust the size and the origin point. You see I put the origin point right on the corner. That's sort of best practice. And then upload it. And so think about all the events you might be able to do with this. One thing I'd like to do is have a paper architecture contest and sort of challenge people to come up with some concepts maybe for a particular place. So experiment with that. We'll put out some videos about this soon, but I'm really excited about playing with the possibilities here. And then the third one is generative AI. So if you've been following the AI trends, you know that AI is starting to be able to create 3D models. A lot of that is hidden behind closed tools, but there's a couple tools already that can generate a 3D model. One of them is called Genie from Luma Labs. And so we use Genie to generate, just via text prompt, create an office building. And it come up with something like this, a little blurry, but plausible, maybe. And so we published this just down the street from our office. And blew it up to real scale. Similar issues again with scale. It doesn't, you can tell it to do a life-size building, but it's still going to be a meter high. So you got to blow it up to real scale and move that origin point down to the ground plane of the model. If you know how to do that, I'll make a guide for this. It's pretty easy, even if you've never used the 3D software. But yeah, that's the third use case. So really excited to maybe start experimenting with some of these quicker methods and brainstorm some ideas with the community. So feel free to get in on that. We have a Slack group that you can join for our user community, which I'll try to get the invite link here. All right. So here's the invitation link to our Slack group. It's a little quiet right now, but I think some of this stuff could, give us some good stuff to play with. So that's pretty much it. We're at the end. The one thing remaining is our free PDF handbook. So we've been working on this for a while. This is a first version of our guide that's distilling a lot of the knowledge we dropped on you today, and will be updated over time. But we have it available from our survey. So if you fill out the survey link at the end, you'll be able to grab a version of this, and we will be sending out follow-up emails just with the recording of the webinar and including the link to that survey as well, if you want to do it later. And so that's it. I wish we had more time for some audience questions, but it looks like we got to some in the chat. But if anyone wants to stick around and chat for a bit, I'm here. So thank you so much. And thank you especially to Christian, our guest, and Brian Lee Jr., our guest from Colocate. It was great to have everyone today. Spread the knowledge. We're all trying to, learn how to be storytellers, that digital storytellers for urban futures. So let's build this, because I think it's a big change happening to the industry. We don't really know. It's hard to describe what it is, but once you start saying, it's like, okay, it's about real time, it's about 3D, it's about storytelling, I think it starts to sort of Cohere as this new skill set that we have to build together. So anyway, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And Ziv just put in the chat the link to the survey, and you can download this free handbook as well. Thank you all for being here. Again, really appreciate you joining. Nick, Christian, Brian, great job. Thank you all.
We will be in Barcelona next week for the Smart Cities Expo. If anyone's going to be at World Smart Cities, Smart City Expo World Congress, we're going to be there next week. The week after in New York, there's a real estate tech event, CRE Tech. We're going to be exhibiting there. And then in the third week of November, we're one of the top 3 finalists for a Resilience Challenge with Australian Red Cross, QBE Insurance, and Leading Cities. So I'll be in Melbourne, and then we'll be talking more about humanitarian use cases for AR. So we'd love to connect with anyone then. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, and have a great rest of your week, great Halloween, and great weekend, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.